Let's play a game. Let's play truth or myth about translation.
Rapport International, professional translation and interpretation services.
First one, all translators are the same. Is that the truth or a myth? Well, you pretty much know that's a myth because not anyone can always be the same. But let's talk about this a little bit more. Translators who are professional go through training. They have master's degrees in programs where they can learn how to handle special situations. They're fully bilingual in the source and the target language. The target language has to be their native language because that's where they really know the deep down depths of what the meaning is on everything. They understand when they need to research the meaning for something, and they pay attention to detail. And many of ours have PhDs or master's degrees in certain subjects that they translate for. So translators are not all the same. That's a myth. Number two, translators are interchangeable. Well, this one you would think, say you get a translator you get two translators that are really good, they've got the same qualifications, so you should be able to interchange them, right? Well, that's actually a myth. Because translation is like writing. The more you do it and the more you work with the subject matter, the more in depth you get to know. So when you start working with a translator, it's good to really develop that person as long as you like their style enough and can keep going with it. So translators, even if they're equally qualified, are not interchangeable. How about number three? Agencies. So translation agencies are interchangeable and all the same. Well, they're not. If you look at all the different agencies that are out there, you've got large ones, you've got small ones. And then if you look at what they specialize in, with all the machine translation and the AI, companies are starting to really pick out what they're good at. There's some agencies that will crowdsource something. If you've got something that's confidential, you don't want to crowdsource translation. You've got some agencies that use a machine translation and then they have a human editor. It's going to be good enough in certain situations, but it's not a high quality marketing translation or something that you could have liability on. You've got agencies that really specialize in certain industries, so they go down depth and they keep current as to what's happening. So make sure when you're picking an agency, you're actually asking how they're qualifying, what they specialize in. You know, if they tend to do more interpreting than they do translation, then they might be more capable of providing in-person interpreters than they are of doing written translation. So really check out your agency and don't just shop on price. Number four is you can save costs and do it just fine with bilingual employees or distributors. Well, this isn't the case. I see a lot of companies doing this. Oh, we don't need to translate, our distributors do it. Well, what we've seen is distributors speak English well enough to do business with you to become your distributor, but they're not fully English speaking enough to be able to write something in the language or really understand it. So when they take the English and they're putting it into another language, they may be taking shortcuts. The other thing is distributors are salespeople typically, and so they may take that carefully crafted marketing message that you've spent time developing your personas, and they may switch it to, you know, low cost, buy this because of this, and more in a sales message. So if you've really spent time figuring out your target market and honing your marketing message, distributors you may want to take a second look at. And then plus we see waste because you have your distributor in Spain doing a Spanish translation and your distributor in Argentina doing the translation, and they're both a Spanish translation that could be used in the same place if it doesn't need to be localized, which you can read more about that on our website. Then you've got people who are wasting their time rather than getting your products out there. Bilingual employees, it's taken away from their time, their main job, and you don't know if they're fully qualified, and plus you're not going to want to use an engineer who's bilingual to translate marketing material or vice versa. So it really takes somebody who understands the material, has the qualification, and knows the grammar. So bilingual employees, are they good at judging quality? Is this a truth or a myth? Now this one gets tricky. I'm going to say it's a myth because you can have bilingual employees who may only be bilingual because they took a language in high school. They may be bilingual because they grew up with a Spanish-speaking family here in the United States, but they didn't actually get the formal education. They may not be capable because they are not grammarians, and so they'll change it to a more colloquial wording when you really need to have it formal in writing and be accurate. So we recommend, and this is the truth part, is that you have your translator and your editor if you're going to have one. We'll talk about that later. And then you have your bilingual employee read it for industry-specific terminology and references and any company specifics and anything that might be glaringly stand out to them. And that's the kind of proof that you want them to do. But to do the edit, it takes a special person to do. Number 6, truth or myth? Google Translate is good enough for my needs. I'd have to say myth if you're looking at translation. Google Translate is perfectly fine for if you get an email in and you don't know what it's about, and you can pop it in, you can get the gist. It's perfectly fine for you have a large amount of content and you want to narrow it down to what you're looking for in specific. Then you can take that and get that translated. But there are so many errors that happen with Google Translate. If you ask anybody who's bilingual, they'll tell you story after story of what they've read on Google Translate that they can laugh about or say it just doesn't make sense. So number 7, marketing translation can be automated. Is that truth or myth? Marketing translation is one of those things you absolutely should not automate. It's a myth that you can do that because there's so many little idiosyncrasies to it. You may be using pithy words to capture a meaning. You may be making cultural references that aren't appropriate across different cultures. You use creative word choices. Brand names, taglines should all be tested. So this is an area where it's really worth spending some time on. Number 8, good translators never need editors. Truth or myth? This, I've got to say, depends. Because if you have a good translator and you're doing a letter that is going out to the parents and you work for a school district, you want to have a good translator doing that. Schools are tight on budgets. They've got usually very direct communications. That's probably fine to get away with a high quality translator. Now, when you get into something that's longer, more technical, has legal liability issues, this is when you're going to want to have an editor, because it's not just an extra expense. What it is 2 equally qualified translators, and they're going to read it through to make sure that the meaning is exactly the meaning that you're trying to portray. And sometimes things can be read in 2 different ways. This is why when you're writing in English, you have an English editor go through it when it's something really important. So that's when we recommend an editor. Number 9, marketing material cannot be translated, it must be transcreated. Truth or myth? I'm going to go with another myth here. I think that if you do a good global English translation, that you should be able to use a good marketing translator to capture the meaning, make sure cultural references and pictures and colors are all appropriate, and that it's portrayed accurately, particularly if you're a manufacturing, you're an industrial, if you're just starting out with translations and you're doing a globalized English. Now, if you are Nike and you're selling soccer balls around the world, you may have different creative departments creating this because you're going to be working with different sports figures, different famous people, different, logos and colors to really accurately represent that country. So, but for most of the time, I think if you do well-written English in a global English style, in which you can read more about on our website too, then you can do a marketing translation. And number 10, here's your last one. So if you haven't been getting them, here's your chance to redeem yourself. Every word has a translation. You know this is a myth, because all I needed to say to you is Farfignugan, the pleasure of driving. Do you know whose tagline that is? If you know, put on the comments below. But there's also many words that don't have a direct translation. For example, In Chinese, there's many different characters for the word love, because you have familial love, you have parental love, you have spouse love, and so you need different kinds of love for that. For in Peru, there's lots of different kind of potatoes that they have different names for. Here we just call it sweet potato, white potato, purple potato, little potato. And let me see, Eskimos, they have a bunch of words for snow. So these are just some examples on it. So love to hear your comments about translation down below. What words are from foreign languages that you know there's not a translation for, so you use it. Love to hear your comments or any insight you have into this. Thanks so much for listening. We'll talk to you later.
If you found this video helpful, please share it, leave a comment, and subscribe. If you like hearing fun language and culture facts and goofs, use the link below to subscribe to our bi-monthly Tidbit newsletter. And of course, visit our website for more information or to schedule a free translation assessment.